Welcome, everyone, to another episode. I'm so delighted you're here with me today. It's your host, Annalena, and I am very happy to have another special guest with me today. Her name is Christie Holt, and she's the visionary CEO of FeelWise, a revolutionary wellness app that combines emotional intelligence, personalized challenges, and AI-driven voice analysis to foster personal growth and well-being. With a passion for empowering individuals to understand and manage their emotional energy, Kristie's work focuses on helping users cultivate self-awareness, emotional resilience, and deeper connection in their everyday lives. Her expertise lies in blending technology with mindful practices, creating transformative tools that inspire growth on holistic well-being. And Kristie's leadership at FeelWise reflects her mission to make emotional wellness accessible, practical, and engaging, helping people slow down, connect with themselves, and achieve quantum leaps in all areas of life. So welcome. I'm so happy you're here today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. That sounds like a lot that you just read out loud.
Yes, that's your bio. Pretty amazing. I think it's always incredible when we hear our bio from other people, right? It's like, whoa, this is me.
Right? Especially when someone else is reading it. Yeah, it looks good on paper, and then you read out loud and like, wow, that sounds like a lot.
Yeah, so I was really intrigued when I think it was your agent reached out to propose you as a guest on my podcast because I personally, we chatted about this briefly because before we got on the podcast, that I love the whole emotional work. That's a lot actually what I do also with my clients. It's like the deep inner healing work. And for me on my journey, it was so profound when I finally understood like it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be angry. Like we are humans. We're not supposed to suppress all of this, right? And
Right.
what really intrigued me is so not only do you work with this, but you also incorporate AI because I mean, in today's age, I think we can no longer ignore AI. And I have also to say that today in my business, it has become an integral part. It's almost like my little VA that is
Yeah.
super helpful. And it's becoming, I have to say, more and more authentic and very nice and encouraging and empowering to help me get stuff done quicker and more efficient. So I would love to hear a little bit about your journey and what brought you into the co-creation of the FeelWise company and there's an app as well, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So I've been doing AI. We'll start there. And like, how do I know about AI and why do we use AI and where did it come from? So we have been gathering data about emotional intelligence and voice data for about the last 8 years. And 4 years ago, we had enough data to start saying, okay, how can we help human beings improve their own self awareness by giving them objective data about their emotional state? And that was kind of the question that I was asking myself, and the team was trying to say, can we use objective data to help us become more self aware? Because most of the data we collect about ourselves is very subjective. Well, what do we think it is? And what the funny part about that is it's all a reflection of our own perception. So if we're trying to expand in our own level of consciousness, how do we become more self-aware objectively rather than subjectively? Well, we can ask our friends, we can look at the outcomes, we can ask our relationships and say, tell me a little bit more about how you experience me. Or we can ask AI. And that's really where this got started. And back then, AI, by the way, no one knew what I was talking about. In fact, I didn't even really know what AI was until I started to ask questions on if we can see patterns in humanity, how can we use those patterns to become more self aware? And that's when I had a very good friend say, if we can find the patterns, AI can find it and then help us through understanding emotion. I was like, great, let's do that. So we were using different technologies from around the world, that they had started to use biofeedback in the voice to determine specific emotion. And there was two at the time in the world that had established some type of voice technology determining emotional states in the present moment. So I gather data from both technologies to find out accuracy, and then did a lot of subjective research on this accuracy and objective research to find consistency. And sure and behold, we were able to develop our own AI. So it's not based on another large AI system like ChatGPT or other things that are out there today. In fact, when we started, that didn't even exist, or at least we weren't aware or didn't have access to it. And nor would it even have helped us in what we were doing. So we ended up building our own proprietary AI system that takes a 15-second voice wave, takes a picture and studies that voice wave to see what frequencies were hit during those 15 seconds, and then give us a review on, well, how much of that 15 seconds holds the frequency of happiness, or holds the frequency of fear, or holds the frequency of confusion. And then how do we help a user understand, number one, their voice frequency information, and how do we make it useful for them to add value to their everyday life? And so it's been quite a project and quite a journey to get that all figured out. And it was way before, like I said, AI was the new kid on the block. And at the time, the term emotional health was not an actual term. Isn't that weird? Like if you were to Google emotional health, only mental illness came up. At the time, mental health wasn't even a known term. So mental health and emotional health are more, they really got more mainstream after COVID. Before COVID, they were just terms that were very loosely used and not really even defined. And then even another term that we've really helped define is emotional intelligence. Again, it's been around, but it hasn't even hit mainstream until recently. So we've been innovators, early adopters, just really trying to set a foundation for emotional understanding. I mean, even emotion, like people didn't even know what it was, nor did anyone care until about COVID, when people were home and emotionally feeling charged and didn't know what to do with it. And then people are saying, what do I do with all this emotion I'm having? I've never felt these things. So that's kind of where I got started. And if I was to tell a little bit more authentic heart story, the reason I cared so much about getting to the depth of emotion was someone who I loved very, very much and still do. Loved sounds so past term. Was really struggling with, today I would call it mental health, but at the time, depression. And everything that I was being told was to just give medication. And I do think that there's a place for medication, but I felt like it was just an outcome. What's the root cause? And the more that I studied, the more I dug deeper into it, it all was based around emotion, which no one was talking about at the time. So for me, it was like just a crusader trying to figure out what causes us to think, feel, and do what we do. And at the core of it is emotion. It's energy in motion. It's what drives us to do what we do. It's what drives us to perceive how we perceive. So for me, it's been this internal quest to understand emotion to help people around me, especially someone who I love very much, uh, I would say transform out of depression.
Mm. Wow, I'm impressed, and I don't get impressed easily. Just want to say that. I have so many questions. So my first question is, how did you get into, like, I'm usually don't ask people about degrees, but you really got me curious, and I can sense you're very humble because you're not even like telling all the degrees you have. But what area were you working in before because you were saying you were doing research, and so it
Yeah.
sounds super advanced to me. Yeah.
Well, I would say the level of research didn't come till later, but my background is accounting and business management.
Oh, really? Like me. Okay.
Okay, so what I'm super grateful for is I've maintained an entrepreneur mindset my entire life.
Mhm.
Um, also, I know we talk about human design, right?
Energy generator, I was gonna say, yes.
I'm a 3/5. It's like I am going to experiment everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's my three in me, is to just experiment and ask a lot of questions and want to know how the world works at an internal level and a very deep understanding. And I think I was born that way. I mean, I love that you talk about human design on this podcast because I feel like the listeners will just get that. Like, I'm a three. I came a three. I don't know how not to be a three. So I have the life experimenter is really, you know, what that is. So at a very young age, I really developed an entrepreneurial mindset and started to solve questions or solve problems from it. And there's a 5 in there, from a different perspective. And so for me, it became very much my own life experiences as I asked these questions. And then I'd usually create a business to support it, which is very weird. I don't think I've ever said it that way, but something that would interest me, I'd be like, wow, I want to know everything I can about this. And then I want to help other people know about this too. And I'd create a business.
I
So,
think it's wonderful, and kudos to you. It's incredible.
well, thank you. So at the time, I started really understanding energy.
Mm.
Well, I feel like this is a deeper story. It's probably when I was about 14 years old. I had some pretty mystical experiences at 14 that then drove me to kind of leave my religious foundation of understanding about 19. And then I really went into some cool exploration, not very unconscious. I didn't understand what was happening at the time, to understand, you know, gifts that I may have, understanding energy. And then I started asking a lot of questions about energy, and I started a solar company,
Wow.
but you didn't see that one coming. But at the time, I was understanding how we harness the energy of the sun, how we hold that energy, transform that energy, convert the energy, channel that energy into a physical object to make the light go on, right? I mean, interesting when you think about it that way, because when we think about our energetic systems in our body, we are conduits of energy. And I learned what a conduit was actually by owning a solar company. So at the time, this was in 2014, that's how I really understood energy from my own research and development and turning it into a business. And then understanding, well, how do we do that in human form, what we're doing over here with solar? And that's where everything came more at a scientific base for me, where it wasn't just this esoteric, mystical perception of energy that I could feel inside of me. It became something that had science and proven methodologies that I could go and prove, and then take that proof and put it into proving out our energetic systems in the body.
I love it so much. And super interesting. And I really love that we connected because I also, when I started my journey as a coach, at first I became a health coach, but then I very quickly asked the question, well, what about energy? So somehow that part was missing for me. And then I think it was about almost 6 years ago now, where I practiced something where I got certified in a modality called emotional acceptance, because that's what I needed. I did not learn growing up anything about emotions, right? And I was always a very swallow down your truth kind of person, and it's not
Yeah.
safe to speak your truth. And I had a lot of fears and anxiety, and being sad or being angry, I think, was just not acceptable. And this whole idea of just be happy didn't work either for me. You know, it's like this whole like mindset work, just focusing on the positive. And I was like, I'm missing something here big time. And when it came to actually taking a pause and feel my emotions without judgment,
Um,
wow, that really started to shift things for me. And this was even before human design and Gene Keys found me. And I really believe that that work I did for almost a year and a half, almost 2 years at the time, I think, really opened up my awareness of how life works so much, and the compassion that I developed for not only myself, but also for other humans. And actually that And I know I love this actually. You're also super deep into the gene keys. You shared with me, especially the gene key 52 is one you deeply love, right? Which is about
Yeah.
stillness. And it's being that mountain, no matter how crazy things going around us, and we are in that moment, almost like a Buddha kind of state. And how every shadow, which are those fears and emotions that feel uncomfortable, they're really our access point. It's like the way Richard Rudd explains this is like the shadow is like the seed in the soil. And then the gift that emerges is kind of like, when the first green leaf is coming out of the ground.
Mhm.
And then the city is like highest level of consciousness. It's like when the flower is fully blooming, right? Or the tree has grown. And so I was like, well, if we try to suppress these, again, what we label as negative emotions, we're not going to ever live our fullest, fulfilled life. It's kind of this super suppressed, just getting by kind of state. And yeah, that really transformed everything for me. And then for me, it was human design and gene keys came into my world. And I think it helped me also to understand it in such a beautiful way. And then the added piece, which you also manifesting generator, that was also when I first discovered my human design in the tropical system, also myself manifesting generator. And I needed that permission to be multi-passionate because I was telling myself for the longest time, you have to pick a niche, you can only do one thing. And I was just like, I can't, I just didn't
Yeah.
feel right. And it helped me come back home to myself in a way. And yeah, it's such a beautiful gift, but it started all with the emotions. And one thing I really wanted to share with you, because you talked about awareness. And I remember at the time when I studied this emotional acceptance, my mentor at the time, he was like, what is the most important thing for this ever to work? Like without it, nothing is gonna, and it was like, it's awareness. If you're not aware, how can you transform anything? And what I love is your piece that you were saying, I can be aware even today, but it's always through the lens of my still conditioning, right? I
Yeah.
think that's what you were trying to say. So AI, what I understood you said is that AI can help me to kind of point out my shadows that I still cannot see because of the conditioning.
Yes, yeah. Well, yes, you just said so many things. There's a couple, if you don't mind, I would love to go a little bit on the emotional alchemy
Mhm.
and then touch on the self-awareness um, and the stillness. There's like three things that you just said. I want to give a visual or a story just really quickly about the stillness piece and then go into that emotional alchemy because through our stillness is where we can alchemize our current situation and we can really become emotional alchemists. And really what an alchemy is, I mean, changing a precious metal into gold. That was the idea around alchemy. How do we change a metal into something really useful and beautiful and some value, right? That's alchemy. So emotional alchemy is how do we shift this and understand the message of the emotion and almost like you said, like without the judgment. So this emotion is not who I am. This emotion is what I'm experiencing. And what is this emotion giving me the invitation to understand deeply about myself? And then once I have some understanding, how do I just move that emotion through because I got the message that that was intended for me? And maybe I'll start there on like why do we have emotion and what does it actually mean? And the way that I understand it is, emotion is an indicator to help us improve our self-awareness back to our alignment with who we are, with our true essence of ourself, which is, my belief is we are a spiritual being having a human experience that, we come into this life, into this body, we get to have this experience and then we move on. And through that lens, okay, well, how do we know when we are connected to our true source within, right? And the way that I believe we're built are these indicators of emotion. Those are the indicator that your perception of who you are is aligned to that life force within you or it's misaligned. And so when we're aligned, we can feel it, right? We can feel happiness, we feel joy, we feel connection, we feel we feel what we would describe as a positive energy in our body, indicating to us that we are aligned to this true source, this life force that of who we are. And when we're out of alignment through our perception, beliefs, or the way we are, I think you said our program, is that the word you used?
Yeah, conditioning.
Our conditioning. That when our conditioning isn't honoring who we really are, an emotion interjects to say, hey, that's not true.
Yep.
Hey, that's not true. And so for me, what a really good way is we have our inner guidance system, right? And our inner guidance system will ping an emotion to help you as an indicator, invitation to realign that conditioning to align more to what I would say is even more simply love.
Yeah.
Right. So when we're not aligned to love, we're going to feel anger, frustration, disconnect. We're going to feel confusion. And these are just emotion that we start to feel and those little pings to say, hey, that conditioning that you're choosing to believe is truth is actually not aligned to love that which you really are. Right. So emotion to me, understanding that, I'm like, fear is just helping, is a little ping to say, hey, the way you're perceiving that, you might want to take a look at it. It's not really aligned. Or anger, hey, the way you're seeing that other person or the way you're experiencing that other person is not really aligned to your true value system or your true desire, which is love. And I truly believe that, that is our essence of self. Our true nature is love. So when we're not in love, then that's why those are the indicators. So when I started to understand that about emotion, I was like, oh man, I love my anger. I've started a nonprofit out of anger. I love anger. It feels good in my body. As a manifesting generator, I like the heightened emotions. So I'm like, ooh, okay, anger. Instead of like, oh, I shouldn't be angry. It's like, okay, what's the invitation? How am I seeing this? That I just could take a different perception, still enjoy the feeling that, right? But shift it, alchemize it into more of a confidence versus anger, just by changing my perception on how I'm seeing something.
Yeah, because I can be judging myself for being angry, and then I get further down in the loophole. Or I don't know if you know Kyle Cease, but he always says like to add, and I love that at the end. So it's like, I'm so angry and I love it. You
And
know,
I love that. Yeah.
any trigger that comes our way. And yeah, then because that's really what happens. I have noticed for myself, it's not really the anger that's so bad, it's my judgment about it or my perception about it. Or when we
Perception.
can
Yeah.
actually see it. And this is honestly the entire message of the Gene Keys, for example. Like the gift is in the shadow. Richard Wright keeps saying it over and over again.
Always.
It's hard for us human to get it on like a visceral level. It takes time. I think it starts with a logical mind understanding, but to really get it and embody it, we have to hear it over and over again, and we need apps like this that you have developed. And I
And
think it's,
could I even use one more word on that to embody it?
yeah,
The true gateway to embodying it is to feel it,
yeah,
is to get okay feeling anger
yeah,
and feel it in your body as something that's just makes you, that's embodying anger.
yeah,
Meaning, I'm going to let my body experience what it feels like to be angry. And by the way, it's going to feel a little uncomfortable. It might like cause a little bit of stress. It might like burn a little bit. It might ache a little bit. It might, it's going to be uncomfortable.
yeah,
But now that I recognize that's how my body is internalizing. Now I'm going to say a negative energy emotion. And we want to judge negative or positive as good or bad. That's not what I'm saying. But every emotion holds a energetic charge.
mhm,
Okay. Every emotion. So it holds either a positive, and goes back to my solar days, right? It holds a positive charge, literally like a positive charge, or it holds a negative charge. And that's what we mean by positive and negative. We don't mean good or bad. We're not saying right or wrong or the judgment of something. It literally holds that energy. So when those negative energies, if we hold that in our body and we start to embody or believe those negative energies who we are, your body's like, no, that's not true. It's not true. It's not true. So it's starting to, it doesn't resonate with who you are. So it starts to reject you accepting that as a truth. So it will start to hurt or add a pain or add a discomfort. And you're like, but I'm trying to. So it's really kind of cool. It's like go and mapping your body and then releasing that energy just by feeling the emotion. And then what I do is I affirm it. Like, oh, I just needed to experience that. That's not who I am. Thank you for the invitation for me to remember. It's like, okay, jealousy or comparison or the illusion of being disconnected or fear. Like, wow, okay, I'll share one story about fear. And so to understand how to alchemize and get the message and the indicator. And by the way, when it's and emotions, they just start off like a little pinprick. Like, that's not true. That's not
Kind of
true.
like the triggers, right?
Yeah, just a little nudge, right? But if we ignore it and suppress it and avoid it, the nudge of the lie gets louder, where all of a sudden it's like, I now know what it feels like in my stomach. By the way, because that's my emotional indicator. If I am believing negative emotion is truth, my stomach hurts. It hurts really bad. Or if I have this illusion of like all this stress, it goes in my shoulders and my shoulders just start to hurt. And I'm like, oh, that's me not getting the ping. I keep ignoring it. So now's my invitation to actually feel it and let it go. So here's a funny story of a belief I had. And I've told this quite a few times. So if anyone's ever watched it, we talk about this, but I was told about 12 years ago from a business partner who I really loved and trust that I was not a good speaker. Now, by the way, there's all these reasons. I just had my third baby, all these anyway, I just had a lot of wacky stuff going on. And she said, maybe you should speak at our event. Well, I took that as a truth. And by the way, my lighting just changed. I don't know what happened. It's like the sun went behind a cloud. But I kind of accepted that as a truth. And so every time I was going to speak on a stage or even in front of 5 people, and I love talking, so it was really different. I would start, my body would physically react to this new belief that I adapted as true. I would get a stomach ache, I'd get all these nerves, I would get like my body just would hurt because I was believing this idea that I shouldn't speak. I shouldn't even open my mouth and share, right? And I really started to understand that that is not true, that the truth is there's something valuable for me to say. And I still started to work on this shadow of belief for a while. And I started to understand what it felt like in my body when I believed this story. That I knew what this fear felt like now, right? So it was about a year ago, I was walking to go speak to a lot of people. And all of a sudden that fear crept in and I could feel it in my stomach. And I was like, and normally I just like, no, everything's fine, everything's fine. And I go get on that stage and just deal with it. And I was like, no, wow, I want to honor this. And I stopped in my tracks and I was like, okay, thank you, fear, for showing me that I was believing something that's untrue. And then I just sat and I got in touch with myself and I just affirmed, I trust myself. I have something to say. Something I'm going to say today might help one person. And I am so grateful. I am so grateful for my experiences. I'm so grateful for my willingness to share. And I just had to reaffirm what was true. Right. And I will tell you in 2 seconds that fear dissipated. I got the ping, I got the message, and I just refocused, got realigned, and was like, oh, okay. So fear didn't have to feel scary. It didn't have to feel like fear and this like thing that was going to overtake me. It was just this little message that I now recognize that I just needed to reaffirm the truth to myself. And then it was gone. And I got up and I gave one of my best talks I've ever given. because I felt like it wasn't coming from this fear that I was avoiding. It came from a more centered place in alignment with myself and trust in myself. It was a really powerful experience. And then here's the cool part about healing and transforming those shadows and those things that we've had from the past is every time I think about that trauma, well, I alchemize that fear in the moment so that energetic connection to any trauma I've had that was associated with that fear started to just reside. It literally alchemized all of that past trauma because I healed that fear in the moment. So when you go back to those traumas, it doesn't feel the same anymore because you healed it, because you felt it and you released it.
Yeah, and I mean, it just shows again, right? We have to pause, we have to slow down because I mean, you know this probably more than anyone, but we live in a world of distractions, right? And because we don't like to feel uncomfortable emotions, we do all the things to be overly busy, to distract ourselves, if that was food or social media, all these things, right? Or constantly being busy. I think sometimes we feel super restless when we don't do anything because there is this conditioning of like, I have to do, and we feel like we're not getting things done. And if we can, and I mean, I have known this, but hearing it from you gives it the next level of integration for myself, I have to say, that it's these moment to moments in the now, in the present moment, where we always have that choice, right? And I think this is actually, I don't know if you have dove into the 35th gene key, but it talks about that. It's all about change, that gene key. And Richard Rudd talks about there that in every single moment, because we often think, oh, I have this path and have no power over it, right? And yeah, we have a path, but we can go here or we can go here, right? We can be in a different movie. And that's through these in the moment decisions of how we respond to these triggers, to these fears, to these false stories that we carry. And it's requiring some courage, it's requiring some resilience. And a friend of mine, actually, she was also part of this emotional acceptance training I did at the time. And she always used this analogy of, I think it's a water bull. It's an animal that the way when a storm is coming, the way through is they move towards the storm. They don't run away from it. Because if they run away from it, the storm keeps chasing them and they keep running and it's exhausting, right? So it's like this never ending chase. But if they have the courage to say, hi, storm, or hi, fear, in that sense, let's have a conversation. And it's going to be uncomfortable. But then you know how quickly the storm passes when you have the courage to move towards it. So
I love that you said that because I also believe that the more that we lean in, it does, like fear doesn't, you don't feel so afraid of fear. Confusion doesn't feel so confusing. Frustration doesn't feel so frustrating because our relationship to it is it's there as a nudge or an invitation. It's not there to hurt me. And if we understand that, then I think, the storm is not here to kill you. It's actually here to help you. It's like, oh, okay, then I just need to like almost dissipate my perception of what that storm actually is and just lean into it and say, how is this happening for me?
Yep.
And that's been a saving grace of my entire life through every obstacle or storm that has come my way is just say, okay, I truly believe everything in us is happening for us outside of us. Like it's a mirror, right? That the universe gives us a mirror of our internal state so we can help understand what's going on inside by seeing what's happening outside. And I think it's so powerful to just say, to lean into it as though it's here for me always, that I create, almost even take accountability. Like I created this storm to help me remember who I am.
Well, that's a write it down on my first coaching mentor. She always, when something was important, was like, it's a write it downer. And even then, because you said the same thing. It's so funny. Like we learned these things years ago. When I first became a coach, it was like life is happening for you. It's not against you. But
Yeah.
it took more this emotional work for me to really understand that. At
Right.
a
And the more emotional you feel, the more I think is the louder. Why do we have like a midlife crisis? I was just having this conversation because I'm midlife. Like I'm here.
Me
I'm just
too.
in it.
I'm 42. I'm totally in it.
Okay, and I'm like, so no wonder people get, it's like, oh, I want to relate it back to like the human design, the number 6 in your profile. I mean, there's cycles of life that happen, and why around 40, 50 years old, we start to deconstruct all of our beliefs and perceptions. And I think right now, those nudges like get so loud that we can't ignore them anymore. And again, I truly believe our emotional nudges are to help us remember who we are. That you are not this experience, you are just experiencing this experience.
Yeah.
You are a spiritual being that's perfection, your life force in experiencing a human body. But you are the life force. That's who you really are. So I feel like as our midlife, it's like we can't ignore these nudges any longer. And our body, because our body is telling us, our our reality is telling us, and again, it's an invitation to realign. So I feel like when we come, at the next part of life, we get to a state of acceptance and enjoyment and stillness where we get to slow down, and we're not trying to prove who we are. We're not trying to prove this existence, but we're accepting it as though we chose this, and we're here in purpose of the experience.
Yeah, I love this. This also triggered a thought about the jinkies now again, because once we become aware, and just like your app, right? The gene keys are an awareness tool at the end of the day. It's to
Yeah.
make us aware of these, oh, we have these 64 shadows. It's normal. Like, let's not make such a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
Let's move through it. And it
It's a
says,
purpose,
yes,
right? Yeah.
exactly. And it says in there too that in the beginning, we start to become aware of it. It feels really uncomfortable. And then we start to also feel better. But before we have the big breakthrough, often the shadows become the most intense because also life knows, well, you got the awareness now, you know how to deal with it. So I'm going to throw it all at you. And I'm going, for example, right now through a phase in my life where I have a lot of old fears bubble up. But I have noticed, like, compared to 12 years ago, I can handle it so much different, but there's still some level there, but it's such a blessing to kind of see that progress, that expansion. I
So, can I give you a visual for what you're saying and for listeners too?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to have to visualize some of this, but this has helped me more than anything. So we hit this midlife, or we hit this time where like everything we've been doing isn't necessarily working.
Mm.
What has to happen? What has to change, right? So we start, and imagine I'm pouring. So if this is your life and you've got, imagine ping pong balls being all of your hardships, your challenges. Maybe you don't feel enough. Maybe, oh, go ahead.
Can you, for those that are just listening to the audio, can you explain what you're
Oh
holding?
yeah, so I'm just holding a jar, and imagine in that jar is ping pong balls. And these ping pong balls represent maybe judgments of other people, judgments of your mother, your father, hardships that you have, not the beliefs that you have, believing that you're not enough, believing that you have to prove your worth or your value, or you're not worthy, or you can't do something, or something that someone told you when you were little, or something that a spouse told you, or even a friend told you, and we hold on to these things, and imagine your jar is full of these balls. Okay. So usually we get to a point where we're like, okay, I want to change this. I want to feel better. So we start listening to these types of podcasts, or we start filling this jar with some really good stuff, right? Well, as you start to fill the jar, the bottom of the jar starts to become clear. It's like this good foundation of good stuff that starts feeding your soul. But you'll also notice all of these balls start bubbling up and going to the surface, right? And as you pour good stuff in, it feels harder because all this stuff is like boiling to the surface. All these balls are coming up, and you're like, no, these are uncomfortable. These are like my life's beliefs. These are stories of my past. These are all these hard things that I've already gone through. I don't want to go revisit this. But again, that's where a lot of people quit. They
Yeah.
stop listening to the good podcasts. They stop learning about human design. They're like, I've been doing all this stuff and life feels harder. Okay. So a lot of people quit. Well, you didn't. You kept pouring in this good stuff into create a stronger foundation than the one you had before. And again, you got all your tools, but more of the balls keep coming to the top. Now, your foundation is getting stronger because you're getting more good stuff in there, but some of these balls are still coming and surfacing up at the top. And again, this is where most people quit because it feels so uncomfortable. It feels too hard. And now we're getting to some root stuff that you're like, but that's what my mother told me. And she believes that. And I believe that. And we've done that all of our life. If I change that, she won't accept me. Or my family will think I'm crazy. My husband won't love me. My kids won't like me. All these fears of change. Like if we keep filling up something good, all of these doubts and frustrations keep coming up to the top. Again, you didn't quit. You keep going because you know and believe that if I keep pouring good stuff in here, eventually all of these balls have to leave. And I promise you, and again, you keep pouring good stuff in, and the part where the squeeze gets the hardest is right before all that goodness just gets to create a new reality where you got to let go of the hardest things that you've kept for a very, very long time that maybe is your identity,
Yeah.
things that you hold so much to as your foundational truth. But now those are the last things that you got to let go of to really experience this wholeness of who you are. And by the way, again, most people quit right there because those are the hardest ones to let go because that's usually, again, it's your identity, right? But not you and not, there's going to be a lot of us that keep pouring good stuff in and are willing to detach from every single one of those stories, every single one of those beliefs to have a whole pure, clean foundation and a wholeness of who we really are. And so I think that's why so many people go through that midlife crisis and even so many of us that wake up to who we are, it's like I felt better when I was asleep because I didn't have to deal with all my shit.
That's right. It's true, right? Because we feel comfortable in those limitations or who we're not really are. And it starts to become very uncomfortable. And I love this. I always love visuals because it really helps me remember things so much better. And it's the same essence that you read in the Gene Keys, but that I think is so helpful for people. And I love ping pong, by the way. Uh,
Yeah.
ping pong balls because, and exactly as we keep improving. And I think that's also why we need support. If that's in these beautiful, I mean, I do coaching a lot, group environments or memberships over the app, right? We also have AI
Yes.
these days, luckily, fortunately. So, and also we have so many free tools today, you know, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. So with that, I would love to ask you a little bit more about the app. How can people access this? And one question that keeps coming up, because I also have a daughter, she's 12. Is this also for kids, or have you guys been
Yep.
testing kids?
So thank you for bringing that back home. So I had the pleasure of partnering with Natalie Ledwell, which if you don't know her, I would suggest everybody Google her. She is absolutely amazing. In fact, she's been part of the Transformational Leadership Council globally for quite some time, I think closely to 20 years. But she also has she was the founder of Mind Movies, which is a
Yeah,
visualization
yeah, sure.
technology.
Yeah, I think I have seen her or in the self-development space. Her name sounds very familiar. Yeah.
And she's Australian, she's amazing. So her and I partnered to create FeelWise. And so her evidence-based curriculum for all teenagers is amazing. And she partnered with an incredible psychologist to create that curriculum. And FeelWise is designed for families. Again, I have 4 kids. My kids are 9, 13, 15, and 17. I have 2 boys, 2 girls. I'm right in the thick of raising a family of through awareness and through wholeness. And this app has really, really helped give small bite-sized lessons to help improve not only your emotional intelligence, but life skills as a young person coming up in today's world. And then also gives parents the connection to be able to go on this journey with their kids through small bite-sized lessons. And then you can, we call it our safe place, where you can have safe conversations about your emotions in the app. And then also we have an AI guide in there. So if you're not comfortable, every age doesn't know for sure who to talk to and where they're comfortable talking. So we do have an AI guide in there that you can ask questions to. That's essentially, it's like having a therapist in your pocket on demand. Again, it never will replace human connection, which we very much encourage all of our users to connect to the community and then connect to their team. So, there's a lot of cool features to have you and your family do together. We have a family plan where it's up to 6 people can go on this journey together, do different courses, different challenges, and have a safe place to understand and learn about their emotions to improve their emotional resilience. Or you can just do a buddy plan where it's just you and one other person, like an accountability partner, to say, hey, ask me how I'm feeling, and I want to get better at sharing that. So it gives a common language not only between you and your partner or you and your family, but it also gives greater self-awareness of emotions that might be present that you need a safe place to move through and talk through and understand. But then also it has really cool features like a gratitude journal. We do affirmations, we have visualization, body mapping, mood tracking. There's really cool tools to understand how to improve your own emotional intelligence so you can have a better relationship with yourself and people you care for.
Wow, it sounds amazing. And I agree, right? We need human connection, I think, more than ever. However, we do spend a lot of time on the electronic devices and sometimes you are by yourself, especially, I mean, the world we have created is very isolated, right? Everybody has their own house and everybody is called self-sufficient. We don't live in this state of community living, right? I think we're moving slowly in some areas more back to that. But I think that's also why we have AI. And I was like, hey guys, you need something that talks to you in a nice way, in an empowering way, right? And of course,
Mhm.
we can see AI in a negative way, but I have really started to see, like I told you also in my business, I use it a lot now. When you use it right, it's incredibly powerful. And I think we're just in the beginning stages still of it. It's going to be really,
Absolutely. And most people when they're in a state of suffering or when they're in a state of confusion, it's really hard to feel safe to even articulate a conversation with yourself, let alone somebody else that's not going to judge you or think that something is wrong or bad. Right. So I think,
that's a really good point because oftentimes even when we are in connection with another human, so I have a big fear of rejection always. It's
yeah.
much better than it used to be, but when you have a fear of rejection, then it doesn't feel safe for you to express what you say. Like you can have as much connection as you want. And I think, well, AI is not going to reject me, so
And
it's
do you know what's neat about sharing that? And thank you for sharing that, because a real life example is when you really understand yourself, that level of needing other people to accept you shifts, right? That you might go towards people in a way of connection versus validation. And so I think and I'm saying that like just in a very facts don't have feelings kind of a way. Because I agree. I too have a huge fear of rejection. And for me, it was learning to accept myself as I am and not needing someone to accept me differently than I'm willing to accept myself. And it took me a lot of self introspection and a lot of self love practice to go to those relationships differently, right? Like I'm here as a whole in my whole version of me. And so the energy between us is I don't need your approval and I don't need you to accept me because I approve and accept myself. So then the relationships, the energy between us is just in a energy of acceptance.
Yeah.
And it changes that fear so much.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
but
because
it took a lot of self-introspection to get there. And
with
I'm
that,
not there. I'm
yeah,
not there.
I think it's a working, and mine is too. It's so much better than it used to be, but I still have a lot of work to do, to be honest. I still notice it's so easy, like when you don't hear from a person right away, the mind right away, are they mad at me? Something going on? And I'm starting to notice it now, and I'm like, really? I can laugh about it in some way, but I think I'm really,
Like
really.
I just made up. Do you know what we always say at FeelWise? If you're gonna make up a story,
Mhm.
make up the best feeling story you can.
That's a good one.
Like, because we are literally making up the story in our mind about what we believe or perceive to be the experience of truth,
Yeah.
right? And rather, like, I say this to my kids, I'm like, okay, let's try that story again. But this time, you are the most talented, the most amazing. You're absolutely beautiful. You are so loved. You are so amazing. Okay, now tell that story.
Mhm.
And what if we did that and we just had told a better feeling story every time our mind tries to assume the worst?
Yeah. It's funny because I heard that exact same sentence. I don't know if it was with one of my clients or somewhere. So a better feeling story. I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll say this, I know we need to wrap up here. I heard this from a mentor of mine that in today's world, most people do what we do because we believe we'll feel better doing it. If every single one of us focused more on how we felt, everyone would feel better.
Mm.
And if you want to feel better, focus on how you feel,
Mm.
right? Like really start to find the little pathways to feel better now. Feel better through either your perceptions, your stories, your beliefs, your understandings. Find a way that helps you feel better now. And it is really, truly the most important work we can do.
I love it so much. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom. And if people feel called to reach out to you, how can they find you?
Well, feelwiseapp.com. You can find myself and Natalie. And then, of course, on LinkedIn, I'm there. We have some more fun stuff coming, but come see us in the app. We really share a lot of our own experiences, our wisdom, and really that Natalie's a phenomenal teacher. I think every single, and she's Australian, so her accent is just amazing every time you're listening to her. But I would say come visit us in the app first and foremost, and then of course our website and on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm gonna make sure I post everything in the show notes, and I'm actually very intrigued myself to check out the app. Thank you again. This was super delightful. I also gained so much wisdom, and it's especially those things that I had known them, but you brought them down in such a beautiful way from your own experience, your story. I really love the analogy with the jar and the ping pong balls. I think that's just super fantastic. And I absolutely love that you also make this accessible for kids, because I think that's just so important these days, because with that often isolation that comes from being so much exposed to computers and iPads. I mean, in schools these days, kids almost don't have books anymore. Everything is like on the screen. And well, I also know it's an app, but if it really gets you more in touch with your emotions and really helps you release some of these old stories that are not serving us, it's such a beautiful gift. So thank you for sharing it and following your inner calling and reminding us of how important it is to take a magic pause on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
thank you for having me on the podcast. I hope we get to do this again.
Yeah, I really feel like we probably have more to talk about. And you listeners, as always, thank you so much for being here, for your openness, for your curiosity. I'm pretty sure you really love this episode. I highly encourage you to check out the FeelWise app. It's feelwiseapp.com where you can find it. And again, Kristi, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And I'll be with you all next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.